3 midnight black motorcycles roared through the rain-slicked streets of Oak Ridge Valley, their headlights cutting through the evening mist like predatory eyes. The riders, clad in leather adorned with silver wolf emblems, slowed as they approached. The warm glow of the Timberline Saloon. Inside, Eleanor Blackwood's slender fingers paused mid-polish on a whiskey glass, her steel-grey eyes narrowing as she watched the approaching danger through windows that concealed far more than they revealed. Her late husband's custom Remington shotgun waited silently beneath the bar, one of 27 weapons strategically hidden throughout the saloon, each positioned behind an ornate mirror, each loaded and ready for the confrontation she had spent 3 years preparing for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain intensified, drumming against the cedar-shingled roof of the Timberline Saloon. Lightning briefly illuminated the mountains that cradled Oak Ridge Valley, a remote logging community nestled in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. The saloon stood as a testament to resilience at the heart of the town, its river stone foundation and hand-hewn timber walls weathered by decades of harsh winters and driving rain, yet maintained with meticulous care by its owner. The hand-carved sign above the entrance swayed in the strengthening wind, its namesake silhouette of pine trees against a mountain backdrop now barely visible in the growing darkness. Eleanor Blackwood moved with deliberate precision behind the polished oak. Her movements economical and controlled. At 46, her raven hair was streaked with silver that framed her face like polished nickel, pulled back in a practical bun that accentuated her high cheekbones and the vigilant awareness in her grey eyes. Those eyes had witnessed more than most in this isolated town. They'd observed triumph and catastrophe, prosperity and hardship, peace and violence, though few in Oak Ridge Valley knew the full extent of what those eyes had seen before she arrived 5 years ago. The saloon itself was an extension of Eleanor's character, meticulously organized, practical yet inviting, with subtle elements of refinement that distinguished it from the typical frontier watering hole. Brass fixtures gleamed in the warm lamplight. The collection of antique mirrors, placed strategically around the establishment, sparkled with immaculate clarity. Unlike many bars in logging towns, the Timberline's floors were swept and mopped twice daily. Patrons could enjoy their whiskey in an atmosphere of understated elegance that never tipped into pretentiousness. "Another pour, Mrs. Blackwood?" asked Marcus Sullivan, a grey-bearded logger who'd been nursing the same glass of bourbon for the past hour. His weathered face creased into a grateful smile as Eleanor refilled his glass with a measured hand. "Last one before you head home, Marcus," she replied, her voice carrying the slight lilt of her southern upbringing, a detail that had fascinated the locals when she'd first arrived with her late husband Thomas 5 years earlier. "Sarah mentioned you promised to help repair their porch before the storm worsens." Marcus chuckled, caught in his attempt to delay the inevitable return to his daughter's house of energetic grandchildren. "Nothing gets past those hawk eyes of yours, Eleanor. I swear you remember everyone's business better than they do themselves." Eleanor offered a small smile in return, though her attention had already shifted to the windows, where the 3 motorcycles were now parked in a neat row, their riders dismounting with the fluid confidence of men accustomed to being feared. Her right hand drifted instinctively toward the underside of the bar, fingers brushing against the smooth walnut grip of the Remington concealed there, a habit formed long before she'd become a respectable saloon owner. As she watched the approaching men, Eleanor's mind performed the automatic calculations that had once been as natural to her as breathing. Distances, angles, potential obstacles, lines of sight. Years of training reasserted itself without conscious thought, a skill set that had lain dormant but never forgotten in the years since she'd left her former life behind. The door swung open with deliberate force, a gust of rain-scented wind preceding the three men as they entered. Silence falling over the previously relaxed evening crowd. Eleanor recognized the leader immediately. Victor Crane, lieutenant for the notorious Silverback Wolves, a motorcycle gang that had been systematically terrorizing small towns throughout the region, his face marked by a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, twisted into what might have been meant as a charming smile as he surveyed the establishment. But his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator assessing potential prey. Eleanor kept her expression neutral, though her mind rapidly processed details that most would overlook. The way Crane's leather jacket hung slightly heavier on the right side, suggesting a shoulder holster. The man to his left, known only as Diesel according to law enforcement bulletins, carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of ex-military despite his rough appearance, his eyes constantly scanning the room with professional assessment. The third man, younger and more nervous than his companions, had fresh bruises on his knuckles and a poorly concealed knife sheath visible when his jacket shifted. "Evening," Eleanor greeted them, her voice steady and measured. "Welcome to the timber line. What can I offer you gentlemen tonight?" Brown approached the bar, his heavy boots striking the wooden floor with each deliberate step. He removed his leather gloves with exaggerated slowness, revealing hands adorned with silver rings that matched the wolf emblem on his jacket. "Mrs. Blackwood, I presume?" His voice carried a cultured smoothness that didn't match the hardness in his eyes. "Your establishment's reputation for fine whiskey precedes it. You have me at a disadvantage, sir," Eleanor replied, though she knew precisely who he was. The saloon had fallen almost completely silent, the regular patrons sensing the tension that now permeated the room. "Victor Crane, at your service." He performed a slight bow. "My associates and I are merely passing through your charming valley and thought to sample the local hospitality." Eleanor's hands moved with practiced efficiency, setting out 3 glasses, and filling them with her better whiskey. Not the best she kept reserved for special occasions, but good enough to avoid giving offense. Her movements were unhurried, controlled, though her senses remained heightened, cataloguing every detail of the 3 men before her. "First drinks are on the house," she said. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Valley." Crane's eyebrows rose slightly at the quality of the liquor. "Generous of you, Mrs. Blackwood. Not all establishments we visit extend such courtesies." "I find courtesy costs little and yields much," Eleanor responded, her gaze steady. Behind the bar, her left foot shifted slightly, pressing against a specific floorboard that would alert Michael, her faithful bartender currently in the storeroom, that something was amiss. Crane took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. "Indeed, though I've found that true generosity requires deeper commitment." He set his glass down with deliberate precision. "Which brings me to the purpose of our visit. My employer, Mr. Roman Blackwell, has taken an interest in Oak Ridge Valley. He believes this town has untapped potential." Several patrons quietly settled their tabs and departed, sensing the conversation had taken a turn toward business they wanted no part of. Eleanor nodded almost imperceptibly to Marcus, who understood her silent message to leave as well. The old logger hesitated, but eventually gathered his cap and made his way to the door. "Oak Ridge Valley is a simple logging town, Mr. Crane," Eleanor said once most of the regulars had cleared out. "Our potential seems fairly well tapped already." Crane chuckled, the sound devoid of genuine humor. "That's where vision comes in, Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwell possesses remarkable vision. He sees opportunities where others see limitations." He gestured expansively. "This saloon, for instance. Prime location, solid business, but it could be so much more under the right management." Eleanor's expression remained impassive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. though her mind had already accelerated into the rapid tactical assessment that had once been her professional hallmark. 3 visible threats, potential reinforcements outside, distance to the shotgun beneath the bar, approximately 16 inches, distance to the lever-action rifle concealed behind the mirror above the whiskey shelf, 10 feet. The Smith & Wesson revolver hidden in the cash register drawer, loaded with 6 rounds, recently cleaned and oiled as it was every evening before opening. "The timberline isn't for sale, Mr. Crane," she stated flatly. The younger man shifted his weight aggressively, but Crane raised a hand to still him. "Now, Mrs. Blackwood, no one's speaking of sales just yet. Think of this as a partnership opportunity. Mr. Blackwell provides protection, manages certain aspects of the business that a widow might find challenging, and in return takes a reasonable percentage of the profits. 50% being the reasonable figure Mr. Blackwell has in mind," Diesel added, speaking for the first time, his voice carrying a distinctive gravelly quality that suggested years of hard living. Eleanor allowed a moment of silence before responding, using the time to pour herself a small glass of whiskey. "Mr. Crane, I've managed this establishment successfully since my husband's passing. I have no need for protection, nor for partners." She took a deliberate sip. "Please convey my appreciation to Mr. Blackwell for his interest, but I must decline." Crane's facade of civility slipped momentarily, a flash of anger crossing his features before he mastered it. "Mrs. Blackwood, I don't think you understand the nature of Mr. Blackwell's offer. It's not one that people typically decline." "I understand." "Perfectly, Mr. Crane," Eleanor replied, her voice cooling by several degrees, "and my answer remains the same." The door to the storeroom swung open, and Michael entered, his imposing frame filling the doorway. At 6'3", with shoulders broadened by years of logging work before he joined Eleanor's staff, the former forest ranger cut an intimidating figure. His dark eyes quickly assessed the situation before he moved behind the bar to stand beside Eleanor. "Everything all right, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his deep voice rumbling through the tension-filled room. "Just fine, Michael," Eleanor replied without taking her eyes off Crane. "Our guests were just leaving." Crane's gaze flicked between Eleanor and Michael, reassessing the situation. After a moment, he smiled thinly and finished his whiskey in one swallow. "Very well, Mrs. Blackwood, we won't take up more of your valuable time tonight." He replaced his gloves with deliberate slowness. "But I should mention that Mr. Blackwell is a persistent man. He doesn't take rejection well." "Neither do I, Mr. Crane," Eleanor replied evenly. Crane tipped his head slightly. "We'll be in town for a few days. Perhaps you'll reconsider once you've had time to reflect on the benefits of Mr. Blackwell's protection. Terrible things can happen to businesses in these remote areas. Electrical fires, vandalism, unfortunate accidents." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Crane?" "Merely stating facts, ma'am. The world is full of dangers." He gestured to his companions, and they moved toward the door. At the threshold, Crane turned back. "Oh, one more thing. Sheriff Holden sends his regards. Says he's mighty sorry he couldn't be here to welcome us personally, but with his sudden fishing trip to the mountains, developing and narrating this story has taken considerable time and effort. If you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything to us." Now back to Eleanor's predicament. The implications were clear. The town's law enforcement had been deliberately removed from the equation. After the door swung shut behind them, Michael turned to Eleanor, concern etched on his face. "Those were Blackwell's men, weren't they? The silverback wolves. I've heard stories about what happens to towns that fall under their control." Eleanor watched through the window as the 3 men mounted their motorcycles. Her right hand still rested near the concealed shotgun, though she hadn't needed to draw it yet. "Yes," she confirmed, "and they'll be back." "What do we do?" Michael asked. Eleanor's mind was already racing through scenarios, evaluating options with the analytical precision that had once made her the most sought-after tactical specialist in her former profession before she'd met Thomas and chosen a different life. "For now, we prepare," she said quietly. "Have James watch the back entrance. Send word to Clara at the telegraph office. I need to send a message." She paused, making a decision. "And bring down the case from my office, the locked one." Michael's eyes widened slightly. In 5 years, he'd never seen Eleanor open that particular case. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, disappearing. Up the stairs to her private quarters above the saloon, Eleanor turned back to the window, watching Crane and his men as they rode toward the town's only hotel. She knew their type all too well. Men who mistook violence for strength, intimidation for respect. The Silverback Wolves had been systematically taking over small towns across the region, establishing networks of businesses through which they laundered money from their more illegal enterprises. Drug trafficking, extortion, illegal logging, operations, and worse. They saw a widow running a successful saloon alone and assumed vulnerability. A common mistake, and one Eleanor had encountered frequently throughout her former career. What Crane couldn't know was that before she was Eleanor Blackwood, respectable widow and proprietor of the Timberline Saloon, she had been known by another name in certain circles, Eleanor the Ghost Blackwood, the woman who had orchestrated security for 3 presidential visits, who had trained elite protective details in counter-terrorism tactics, who could neutralize multiple threats in seconds without ever revealing her position, the woman who had once been the most celebrated covert security specialist in federal service before she disappeared from that world to marry a simple saloon owner and start a new life. Michael returned carrying a long, narrow case of polished mahogany secured with titanium fittings and a sophisticated electronic lock. He placed it carefully on the bar before her. "Will there be trouble, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Eleanor's fingers traced the inlaid pattern on the case's lid, a subtle geometric design that concealed a biometric scanner. "Yes, Michael, I believe there will be." She pressed her thumb against a seemingly decorative element, and the lock disengaged with a soft click. Eleanor raised the lid to reveal custom tactical equipment nestled in charcoal-grey foam. The gear was state-of-the-art, specialized communication devices, night vision equipment, and a set of non-standard weapons maintained in perfect condition despite years of disuse. Beside them lay a thin titanium case holding identification, credentials and documentation, each item marked with security classifications that would still open doors in the highest echelons of government. "I had hoped never to need these again," she said softly, more to herself than to Michael. Her fingertips brushed the cool metal of the specialized equipment, and memories flooded back. The rush of adrenaline, the absolute focus of tracking hostile targets through crowded environments, the perfect calm that descended when executing an impossible protection detail. For 5 years, Eleanor Blackwood had kept the ghost locked away, buried alongside the husband she'd loved. But as she felt the familiar weight of her custom-designed sidearm in her hand once more, she knew that part of her had never truly disappeared. The Silverback Wolves had made a critical error in targeting her saloon. They saw a vulnerable widow where they should have seen a predator lying in wait. "Send word to Director Collins in Seattle," Eleanor instructed Michael, her voice taking on a tone of quiet authority that he'd never heard from her before. "Tell him the ghost sends her regards and requests information on the Blackwell operation." Michael's expression shifted from concern to surprise as recognition dawned. "The ghost? You're the ghost? The one they still talk about at the academy?" Eleanor's lips curved in a humorless smile as she checked the action on her weapon, muscle memory returning instantly. The training manuals exaggerate. Reality was more precise. She holstered the weapon. The silverback wolves don't know what they're walking into, Michael, but they will. As the storm intensified over Oak Ridge Valley, Eleanor began checking her equipment with methodical care, her movements displaying a level of expertise that revealed her true nature. The silverback wolves had come hunting what they thought was easy prey, never suspecting they had instead roused a legendary operative. From her self-imposed retirement, by morning, word would spread that the notorious motorcycle gang was in town. By nightfall, they would learn what it meant to threaten Eleanor Blackwood and the home she had built. Behind every mirror in the Timberline Saloon waited a weapon, each positioned for optimal coverage, each maintained with the same meticulous care as the mirrors that concealed them. Eleanor had spent years preparing for a threat she hoped would never materialize. Now that it had arrived in the form of leather-clad wolves, they would soon discover they had wandered into a carefully constructed killing field where every reflective surface harbored death, and the widow they had dismissed was the architect of their downfall. The legendary ghost was about to emerge from the shadows once more, and Oak Ridge Valley would never be the same again. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge Valley, pale light filtering through the lingering storm clouds. Eleanor Blackwood stood at the large bay window of her private quarters above the timberline, a steaming mug of coffee untouched in her hand. She'd slept little, spending most of the night conducting a thorough inventory of her arsenal and surveillance system. The routine had returned to her fingers with unnerving ease, as though the past 5 years had been merely a brief interlude rather than a deliberate escape from her former life. The town below was beginning to stir, unaware of the silent war being waged for its future. Down the street, Eleanor could see activity at the Valley Inn, where Crane and his men had taken residence. 2 more motorcycles had arrived during the night, their riders now standing guard at the entrance with the casual alertness of trained scouts. Reinforcements, she murmured to herself, earlier than expected. Behind her, displayed across the antique oak desk that had belonged to her late husband, lay the contents of the mahogany case, remnants of a life she had once sworn to leave behind. Her tactical earpiece, still connected to secure government. Channels that shouldn't recognize her authentication codes after 5 years of silence, yet somehow did. Night vision equipment more advanced than anything available to civilian markets, a collection of specialized non-lethal weapons designed for close quarters neutralization, and most tellingly, a thin titanium folder containing her former identity, Eleanor Blackwood, codename Ghost, security classification level above even the knowledge of most agency directors. The digital timer on her specialized watch beeped softly. Eleanor moved away from the window and sat at her desk, activating a secure communications device. The response from Director Collins had arrived faster than anticipated, suggesting the situation might be even more serious than she had initially assessed. "Ghost," the message began, dispensing with formalities in the way Collins always had. "Blackwell operation more extensive than previously documented. Criminal enterprise spans 3 states with significant government infiltration. Silverback wolves serve as enforcement arm, primarily ex-military with dishonorable discharges. Leadership includes Roman Blackwell, strategic, and his brother Luther, tactical. Both former intelligence contractors with extensive training." Eleanor absorbed this information with the detached analysis that had once been her professional hallmark. The involvement of former intelligence personnel explained the sophistication of their operation. These weren't common criminals, but trained operatives, using their skills for criminal enterprise. "Federal task force assembled but compromised," the message continued. "3 agents missing, presumed eliminated. Your location was not random. Evidence suggests Blackwell organization specifically targeted Oak Ridge Valley due to suspicious Gap in their intelligence regarding property ownership of the Timberline Saloon. They're looking for something, Ghost. Find out what before they do. The final line sent a chill through Eleanor's spine. Thomas's death may not have been accidental. Eleanor's hand tightened around the communication device. Thomas, her gentle, kind husband who had shown her a life beyond violence and secrecy. The boating accident that claimed his life had been investigated and ruled misadventure, a tragic consequence of the sudden mountain storms that plagued the region. But if Collins was right, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Blackwood," Michael's voice came through the door. "A messenger just arrived from Clara at the telegraph office. Says it's urgent." Eleanor quickly secured the sensitive materials. Before opening the door, Michael stood holding a sealed envelope, his expression troubled. "Thank you, Michael." She took the envelope and noted his hesitation. "What is it?" "There's something else. Silverback members have been asking questions around town about you, specific questions about your background before you arrived here with Thomas." Eleanor's expression remained neutral, though her mind raced. "What kind of questions? Where you came from, whether anyone knew you before Thomas, if you ever received unusual visitors or packages." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "And they're offering good money for information about a woman who matches your description, who supposedly worked in government security 5 years ago." "I see." Eleanor broke the seal on the envelope and scanned the message inside. "We have less time than I thought. Michael, I need you to gather everyone we can trust. Meet at Rebecca's bakery in 1 hour, the back room. Make it look casual, nothing that would draw attention." "What's happening?" Eleanor folded the message and slipped it into her pocket. "The wolves aren't just here to take over the timberline. They're hunting for something specific, something they believe is hidden here. And they've just received permission from their leadership to use whatever means necessary to acquire it." Rebecca's Mountainside Bakery had been a fixture in Oakridge Valley for 3 generations. Its cheerful blue awning and display of fresh pastries made it seem an unlikely place for resistance planning, which was precisely why Eleanor had chosen it. The cozy back room, normally used for private parties, now hosted a gathering of the town's most trusted residents. Michael, Clara from the telegraph office, Rebecca herself, Marcus Sullivan, and James Carter, Eleanor's youngest employee who had once served as a military scout before returning to civilian life. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor began, her voice low enough to ensure privacy, but clear enough to convey authority. "I know this meeting seems unusual, but we face an immediate threat that requires decisive action." "The wolves," Marcus said grimly. "We've all heard the stories about what happened in Riverdale and Pinecrest when they moved in." Eleanor nodded. "The situation is more serious than a simple protection racket. Roman Blackwell, the man behind the Silverback Wolves, runs a sophisticated criminal organization with connections to drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and money laundering. They systematically target small towns, establish control over strategic businesses, and use them as hubs for their operations." "Why Oakridge?" Clara asked, her normally cheerful demeanor replaced by analytical focus that hinted at depths the telegraph operator rarely revealed. "We're remote with no strategic value. The main highway is 30 miles east." "That's what I intend to find out," Eleanor replied. "But first we need to prepare for their next move. Based on their established pattern, they'll begin applying pressure to vulnerable businesses today, likely starting with those owned by women or the elderly." Rebecca paled. "Like my bakery." "Precisely. Which is why we need to establish a communication network and security protocols immediately." Eleanor unfolded a map of Oakridge Valley on the table. "James, I need you to identify defensible positions throughout town. Michael, work with Marcus to establish supply caches, food, medical equipment, emergency communication devices. Clara, we need a warning system that can't be intercepted or disabled. As she outlined her strategy, Eleanor noticed the growing looks of confusion on their faces. Mrs. Blackwood, Marcus finally interrupted, forgive me for asking, but how do you know so much about tactical operations and criminal organizations? The question hung in the air. Eleanor had known this moment would come, the inevitable exposure of her past. She had prepared for it, yet hesitated at the threshold of revelation. These people had known her only as the capable but unremarkable widow who ran the town's saloon. Once she crossed this line, that identity would be forever altered in their eyes. Before I came to Oak Ridge Valley, she began carefully, before I met Thomas, I worked in government security, specialized protection and counter-terrorism operations. You were some kind of agent? Rebecca asked, eyes widening. I was what the agency called a ghost, someone who could move undetected through hostile environments, identify threats before they materialized, and neutralize them without leaving evidence. Eleanor's voice remained steady, though speaking of her past aloud after years of silence felt like peeling away a layer of skin. I conducted security operations for high-value targets, including 3 presidential protection details. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Then Clara spoke, her voice carrying unexpected certainty. You were Legend's ghost, weren't you? The operative who prevented the Belgrade assassination in 2013. Eleanor's sharp glance met Clara's knowing eyes. How would you know about that operation? It was classified beyond public knowledge. A small, rueful smile touched Clara's lips. Because I was Handler 6, your communications specialist during that operation. I thought you looked familiar when you first arrived in Oak Ridge, but you changed enough that I couldn't be certain. Besides, Ghost was reportedly killed in action the following year. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. Eleanor studied Clara with new awareness. The telegraph operator who had always seemed unusually efficient, whose installation had coincidentally occurred just months after Eleanor and Thomas had settled in Oak Ridge. You've been watching me, Eleanor stated. Neither a question nor an accusation. Protecting you, Clara corrected. After Belgrade, you became a target for multiple hostile organizations. When you disappeared, certain people within the agency wanted to ensure you stayed safely disappeared. She glanced at the others. Thomas knew. He helped arrange it. The mention of her late husband sent a sharp pain through Eleanor's chest. Thomas was civilian. He ran a saloon in Seattle where we met. Clara's expression softened with sympathy. Thomas Blackwood was agency support staff, deep cover logistics. He was tasked with helping high-value assets transition to civilian life when their covers were compromised. He wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. That part was very real. But your meeting wasn't coincidental. The floor seemed to shift beneath Eleanor's feet as the carefully constructed narrative of her relationship with Thomas crumbled. The quiet saloon owner who had shown her a path away from violence had been part of her world all along. The revelation should have felt like betrayal, yet somehow it made their connection more profound. He had known exactly who she was, what she had done, and loved her without reservation. If what you're saying is true, Eleanor said after a moment, then Thomas's death was almost certainly not an accident, Clara finished grimly. Which brings us back to the present situation. The Silverback Wolves aren't just here to take over a small-town saloon. They're here because someone discovered a connection between Eleanor Blackwood, widow, and the ghost, and they believe you have something they want. What could that possibly be? Michael asked. Eleanor's mind raced through possibilities, inventorying every item Thomas had left behind, every conversation they'd had about his work, which she now realized had been carefully edited to protect her from the very truth Clara had just revealed. The Belgrade files, she whispered as realization struck. Thomas had a backup. Clara nodded gravely. The Belgrade operation uncovered evidence of government officials across 3 countries collaborating with private military contractors for illegal arms sales. The digital evidence was destroyed in the official record, but rumors persisted of a physical backup, names, dates, banking information that could dismantle entire criminal networks if it fell into the right hands. Or make someone very powerful if they could use it for blackmail, James added. Eleanor's thoughts turned to the Timberline Saloon, to the unusual modifications Thomas had insisted on during renovations, the custom mirrors installed throughout, the establishment, each positioned at seemingly decorative but precisely calculated angles. Mirrors that she had later adapted as concealment for her weapons cache, never questioning why the architectural design had so perfectly suited her security protocols. "They're not just after my saloon," Eleanor said softly. "They believe the Belgrade files are hidden somewhere inside the Timberline. That's why they targeted Oakridge Valley specifically." Marcus leaned forward. "Do such files exist?" Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "If they do, Thomas never told me about them. But he designed the renovations for the Timberline himself, oversaw every detail personally." She turned to Clara. "If you're who you say you are, you know what this means." Clara nodded grimly. "The Silverback Wolves won't stop with intimidation. Tactics. Once Blackwell confirms you're the ghost, he'll move with overwhelming force. We're talking about information worth billions in the wrong hands. Then we prepare accordingly," Eleanor said, her decision made. "But we need to evacuate the most vulnerable residents immediately. Families with children, the elderly, anyone who can't or shouldn't be involved in what's coming." "And the rest of us?" Rebecca asked quietly. Eleanor's expression hardened with resolve. "The rest of us remind the Silverback Wolves that they're not the only predators in these mountains." As the group dispersed with their assignments, Eleanor lingered behind with Clara. When they were alone, she fixed the telegraph operator with a penetrating stare. "How long have you known about Thomas?" Clara met her gaze without flinching. "That his death wasn't an accident. I've suspected since it happened. The storm that day wasn't severe enough to capsize an experienced boater like Thomas. But I couldn't prove anything, and you were fragile. I made the call to wait, to watch, to protect you from a distance until you were ready." "Ready for what?" "To be the ghost again." Clara's voice softened. "Thomas always said there were 2. Eleanor's, the one the world created and the one he fell in love with. He hoped you'd find a balance between them someday." Eleanor turned toward the window, watching as the town went about its morning business, unaware of the gathering storm. "I buried the ghost when I buried Thomas." "Perhaps," Clara replied, "but Oakridge Valley needs her now. And I think perhaps you do too." Outside, 2 more motorcycles with the Silverback Wolves emblem roared down the main street, a show of force meant to intimidate. But as Eleanor watched them pass, she felt something shift within her, a merging of the widow who had found peace in this mountain community and the operative who had moved like a whisper through the world's most dangerous environments. The wolves were hunting for a ghost, unaware that with each passing hour they drew closer to finding her, not as the prey they anticipated, but as the predator they had unwittingly awakened. Mid-morning sunlight glinted off the polished mirrors of the Timberline Saloon, each reflective surface angled to capture and redirect light throughout the establishment. What had once seemed merely decorative now revealed its true purpose to Eleanor's trained eye, a sophisticated optical system designed to eliminate blind spots and create multiple sightlines from key defensive positions. Thomas had built her, the perfect fortress, and she had unknowingly enhanced it by placing weapons behind each mirror, creating a lethal perimeter that could be accessed from nearly any position in the saloon. The mirrors themselves, she now realized, were military-grade, bulletproof, with specialized coating that prevented shattering under impact. Eleanor ran her fingertips along the ornate frame of the largest mirror behind the bar, searching for anything unusual. Thomas had been meticulous in his tradecraft. If he had hidden the Belgrade files here, the concealment would be ingenious. A flash of movement in the mirror's reflection caught her attention, a black motorcycle slowing as it passed the saloon. For the third time in 30 minutes. Surveillance. The wolves were watching, assessing patterns, identifying vulnerabilities. Standard protocol before a strike. "They're getting bolder," Michael observed, emerging from the storeroom with a crate of supplies. They had closed the saloon for inventory, a pretext that would buy them a few hours to prepare. "They're establishing dominance," Eleanor corrected, "making sure we know we're being watched. It's psychological warfare. Make your target feel hunted before you strike." Michael set down the crate, which contained not liquor, but medical supplies and emergency rations. "James reports that 5 more wolves arrived at the Valley Inn an hour ago. That brings their total to at least 12 that we know of." Eleanor nodded, mentally updating her tactical assessment. "And the evacuation? Clara's handling it. Families with children and the elderly are leaving in small groups, fishing trips, visits to relatives, shopping expeditions to the next town over. Nothing that would look coordinated. Good." Eleanor moved to a particular mirror near the staircase, one she had always found oddly positioned. Its angle seemed impractical from a decorative standpoint, yet Thomas had insisted on its exact placement. She pressed lightly against the frame, testing for hidden mechanisms. "What are you looking for?" Michael asked. "I'm not entirely sure," Eleanor admitted. "Anything unusual?" Thomas was methodical about the renovations when we bought this place. If he hid something here, there would be a system, a pattern. Before Michael could respond, the front door burst open. James staggered in, blood streaming from a gash above his eye, his clothing disheveled. "They hit Rebecca's bakery," he gasped, as Michael rushed to support him. 3 of them started destroying the place when she refused their protection offer. Eleanor's expression hardened as she helped James to a chair. "Rebecca?" "She's okay. Mostly. Scared. I was making a delivery when they showed up. Tried to intervene, but..." He gestured to his battered face. Eleanor retrieved a first aid kit from behind the bar, her movements economical as she assessed James's injuries. "Concussion?" "Don't think so. Just knocked me around a bit." James winced as she cleaned the cut. "The younger one, they called him Viper. He wanted to do worse, but the leader stopped him, said something about not spooking the ghost before they were ready." Eleanor's hands stilled momentarily. "Those were his exact words." James nodded. "What does it mean?" "It means they know," Eleanor said quietly, "or at least strongly suspect." She finished dressing his wound, her mind already calculating implications. If the wolves knew her true identity, their approach would shift from standard intimidation to specialized tactics designed to flush out a high-value target. "Michael, get James upstairs and out of sight. Then accelerate our preparations. We just lost whatever time advantage we had." As Michael helped James toward the back staircase, Eleanor moved behind the bar and pressed the hidden switch that unlocked her primary weapons cache. The twin Sig Sauer P226s she withdrew were not the ornate collector's pieces displayed on the wall, but precision tools maintained in perfect operational condition. She checked each one with practiced efficiency before, securing them in shoulder holsters beneath her jacket. The electronic comm unit in her ear, reconnected to secure channels after 5 years of silence, chirped softly. "Ghost, this is Handler. 3 wolves just left Rebecca's. They're heading your way." Clara's voice came through with the crisp professionalism that belied her cover as a simple telegraph operator. "Received. Status of the evacuation. 70% complete. We need another 2 hours for full implementation." Eleanor checked her watch. "They won't wait that long. We need to buy time." She crossed to the window. watching as three motorcycles approached, moving with the deliberate slowness of predators, confident in their superiority. Even at this distance, she could see the malicious anticipation in their posture. This confrontation would be different from yesterday's introduction. Then they had been assessing, probing for weakness. Now they were coming to establish dominance through force. The scenario was unfolding according to standard intimidation protocols. Target vulnerable businesses first, demonstrate consequences of resistance, then escalate to ensure compliance from the remaining holdouts. The wolves had made Rebecca an example. Now they were coming to offer Eleanor another chance to cooperate, an offer backed by the implicit threat of what had just happened at the bakery. "Michael," she called, "take position upstairs. East window. Alert only. No engagement. Without my direct order." "Yes, ma'am." He disappeared up the stairs, understanding the gravity of her tone. Eleanor stood center in the saloon, alone but far from vulnerable as the motorcycles pulled up outside. She counted heartbeats, centering herself in the calm focus that had once made her legendary. The ghost didn't feel fear or anger. She calculated odds, identified threats, and eliminated variables. The door swung open with enough force to rattle the hinges. Crane entered first, flanked by Diesel and a new man, taller, with a military bearing and cold eyes that surveyed the room with professional assessment. The tactical specialist of the group, Eleanor noted, the most dangerous of the three. "Mrs. Blackwood," Crane greeted, his false civility now replaced with overt menace. "I hope we're not interrupting your inventory." "Actually, you are," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying a hint of steel beneath its measured tone. "The timber line is closed today." Crane chuckled as the three men spread out, a standard flanking movement designed to dominate the space. "I'm afraid this can't wait. You see, we've been having some fascinating conversations around town about you, Mrs. Blackwood, or should I call you Ghost?" Eleanor's expression remained impassive, though her mind calculated angles, distances, response options. 3 visible. Threats, multiple mirrors providing tactical advantage, 2 firearms within immediate reach, 11 more accessible within seconds from various positions. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Crane. My name is Eleanor Blackwood." The taller man spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the clipped precision of someone accustomed to command. 5 years ago, an operative codenamed Ghost disappeared after compromising a major arms deal in Belgrade. Official records list her as killed in action, but certain sources suggest she vanished with sensitive intelligence. His eyes narrowed. "Intelligence that our employer has significant interest in recovering." "You have me confused with someone else," Eleanor stated flatly. "I'm a widow who runs a saloon, not some government agent. A widow whose husband died under suspicious circumstances." Crane interjected. "A widow who appeared in Oakridge Valley with no history, no family connections, no past that anyone can verify." He gestured around the saloon. "A widow who somehow afforded extensive renovations to this establishment, including some very specialized modifications." Eleanor maintained her position, seemingly relaxed, but perfectly balanced to respond to any sudden movement. "If you're done with your bizarre accusations, I'd appreciate you leaving. As I said, we're closed today." The tall man, Luther Blackwell, she presumed, based on Director Collins's intelligence, moved toward the bar with predatory grace. His hand trailed along the polished surface as he studied the mirror behind it with professional interest. "Interesting design choices," he commented. Military-grade reflective surfaces mounted at precise angles for maximum visibility of entry, and exit points, almost like someone was expecting trouble. His gaze shifted to Eleanor. "We're not here to hurt you, Ghost. We simply want what belongs to our employer." "And what would that be?" Eleanor asked, allowing a hint of exasperation to colour her tone, while her left foot silently pressed the concealed panic button beneath the floorboard. A signal to Michael and Clara that the situation had escalated beyond negotiation. "The Belgrade files," Luther stated bluntly. "We know Thomas Blackwood smuggled them out before the operation was compromised. Digital copies were destroyed, but he had physical backups, evidence linking government officials across 3 countries to illegal arms trading. Our employer wants those files." "I don't have any files," Eleanor replied, which was technically true. If Thomas had hidden such intelligence, he had done so without her knowledge. Crane's patience visibly thinned. "Enough games." He nodded to Diesel, who moved toward Eleanor with menacing intent. "We saw what you did to Viper's face yesterday when he got rough with the baker woman. Impressive, but it ends now. You're going to give us the files, or we'll tear this place apart board by board until we find them." Eleanor sighed, as though dealing with particularly difficult customers. "Mr. Crane, I've told you I don't have what you're looking for. Now I'm asking you politely to leave my establishment." Diesel closed the distance, reaching for her arm. "You're coming with us, lady. Boss wants a word." What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when Crane tried to piece together the sequence of events, he would find his memory fragmented and unreliable. Eleanor's hand caught Diesel's wrist in mid-reach, applying precise pressure to nerve clusters that sent paralyzing pain up his arm. Simultaneously, her foot swept his leg, collapsing his balance. As he stumbled, she redirected his momentum, sending him crashing into a nearby table with enough force to splinter the wood. Crane reached for his concealed weapon, but froze as the distinctive click of a hammer being cocked echoed from somewhere. Above, Michael, in position as instructed, Luther, more experienced than his colleagues, had already drawn his sidearm, only to find himself staring down the barrel of Eleanor's Sig Sauer, which had appeared in her hand with seemingly impossible speed. "That was impolite," Eleanor said, her voice now stripped of its widow's warmth, replaced by the cold precision of the ghost. "I don't appreciate being touched without permission." Luther's eyes narrowed, reassessing the situation with professional detachment. "You're outnumbered, Ghost. There are 12 of us in town already, with more on the way." "Numbers only matter when both sides are playing the same game," Eleanor replied. "But we're not, are we? You're looking for something specific. I'm simply defending my home." Her aim remained unwavering. "Now, you have a choice. Walk out of... Here, tell Roman Blackwell you were mistaken about me, and leave Oak Ridge Valley. Or discover firsthand why certain people in the intelligence community still tell stories about the ghost." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats, the atmosphere charged with lethal potential. Then Luther slowly lowered his weapon, his expression calculating rather than defeated. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You know that." "It could be," Eleanor countered. "The Belgrade files are 5 years old. Whatever value they had is diminished. There's no reason for further bloodshed." Luther's mouth curved in a cold smile. "The files are only part of the equation now, Ghost. My brother has a particular interest in legendary operatives. Once he confirms you're here..." He let the implication hang in the air. Eleanor's expression remained impassive, though internally she recalculated threat assessments, Roman Blackwell's interest in her personally complicated matters significantly. "Get out," she said simply, "while you still can." Luther nodded to Crane, who helped the groaning Diesel to his feet. The 3 men backed toward the door, maintaining sightlines on Eleanor. At the threshold, Luther paused. "You've gotten soft, Ghost. 5 years ago, we'd all be dead already." "No," Eleanor corrected. 5 years ago, you'd never have seen me. We're coming. Consider this mercy a courtesy to the memory of what I once was. After they departed, Eleanor maintained her position until their motorcycles roared away. Only then did she lower her weapon, the brief surge of adrenaline receding to leave her with crystal clarity. "Michael," she called, "secure the perimeter. We have less than an hour before they return in force." He descended the stairs, rifle still at ready. "What's the plan?" Eleanor moved to the large mirror behind the bar, studying it with renewed purpose. "If the Belgrade files exist, we need to find them before the wolves do. Start checking every mirror, every unusual feature Thomas insisted on during renovations." As Michael began examining the east wall mirrors, Eleanor returned to the one near the staircase that had always seemed oddly positioned. She ran her fingers along its ornate frame, feeling for inconsistencies. "Clara," she said into her comm unit, "accelerate evacuation, we're out of time." "Roger that." "What happened?" They made direct contact, confirmed they're after the Belgrade files and identified Mia's ghost. A moment of silence followed. "That changes everything. Director Collins needs to know." "No," Eleanor interrupted. "Not yet. If we involve official channels now, the wolves will scatter, and we lose our chance to end this permanently." She paused as her fingers detected a slight irregularity in the mirror frame's carving. "Besides, we have another problem. Roman Blackwell apparently has a personal interest in adding the ghost to his collection." "That doesn't make sense," Clara replied. "Blackwell is a businessman, not a trophy hunter." Eleanor's fingers pressed the irregularity, feeling a subtle click as something shifted within the frame. "Unless he has personal reasons for wanting me, specifically." The mirror swung outward on concealed hinges, revealing a small compartment built into the wall behind it. "Handler, I need to go dark. For a moment, stand by." Inside the hidden compartment lay a slim titanium case, secured with a biometric lock keyed to fingerprints she immediately recognized wouldn't be hers. Thomas had hidden something here, but ensured only specific individuals could access it. Eleanor studied the lock, considering options. Attempting to bypass it risked destroying the contents, but leaving it secured meant the wolves might eventually find and crack it themselves. A small envelope was taped to the back of the case, her name, written in Thomas's distinctive handwriting. She carefully removed and opened it, finding a single sheet of paper inside. The message was brief, but its implications staggering. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, then you've discovered what I hoped you never would need to. The case contains evidence that certain people would kill to possess, including the man who arranged Belgrade to fail. The lock is keyed to 2 people, myself and Roman Blackwell's daughter, Sophia. She was my asset. Her father killed her when he discovered she was working with us. The ghost died protecting her, or so the official record states. I'm sorry for the secrets, my love. The truth is in the reflections." "Thomas," Eleanor stared at the message, pieces, clicking into place with devastating clarity. Roman Blackwell wasn't just a criminal seeking valuable intelligence. He was a father pursuing vengeance against the operative he believed had failed to protect his daughter. A daughter who had turned against him, only to die when the Belgrade operation was compromised. The ghost hadn't died in Belgrade, but Sophia Blackwell had, and Eleanor had been the last person to see her alive. "Michael," she called, her voice steady despite the revelation. "We need to move, now." He appeared from the storage room, expression questioning. "The situation is worse than we thought," Eleanor explained, securing the titanium case. "Blackwell isn't just after files, he's after revenge. He believes I'm responsible for his daughter's death." Michael's eyes widened. "Are you?" Eleanor met his gaze directly. "No, but he'll never believe that." She tucked the case into a specialized compartment in her tactical vest. "Clara needs to contact Director Collins immediately. Tell him reflection protocol is active. He'll understand. Then get everyone remaining in town to the fallback position we discussed. What about you?" Eleanor checked her weapons with mechanical Precision, the widow receding as the ghost emerged fully. I'm going to give Roman Blackwell exactly what he wants. A chance to meet the ghost face to face. Outside, thunder rumbled across the valley as storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Eleanor moved to the window, watching as a convoy of vehicles, black, SUVs and motorcycles, wound its way toward Oakridge Valley from the eastern approach. The silverback wolves were coming in force, led by a man whose grief had twisted into obsession. But they were hunting a phantom, a whispered legend who moved unseen until the moment of reckoning. Behind every mirror in the Timberline saloon waited a weapon. Behind every weapon waited a woman who had once been the most feared operative in covert operations. As lightning split the sky, Eleanor Blackwood, the ghost, prepared to become the hunter once more. Rain lashed the windows of the Timberline as Eleanor completed her preparations. The storm had arrived with sudden fury, turning day to premature dusk and shrouding the valley in sheets of water that reduced visibility to mere yards. Nature had provided her with tactical cover, and Eleanor wasn't one to waste advantages. She moved through the saloon with methodical precision, retrieving weapons from their hiding places behind each mirror and arranging them at strategic points throughout the building. What had begun as a precautionary measure years ago now revealed itself as the foundation of an intricate defense system. Every weapon was positioned to cover a specific angle, each mirror aligned to provide crucial sightlines, even in low-light conditions. "Ghost, do you copy?" Clara's voice crackled through the comm unit, distorted by the storm's interference. "Go. Ahead, handler. Evacuation is 90% complete. The remaining townspeople are secured at the old mining office as instructed. I've established a communication relay and basic medical station." Eleanor checked the action on a compact submachine gun before placing it beneath the bar. "And Director Collins?" Message delivered. "He confirms reflection protocol is active. Task force mobilizing, but weather conditions will delay their arrival by at least 5 hours. 5 hours. Eleanor mentally calculated variables. The storm's projected duration, the wolves' likely tactics given the weather, Roman Blackwell's probable response once he learned of the standoff at the saloon. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, but the storm provided a crucial tactical advantage she intended to exploit. "Understood. What about our unexpected asset?" Clara's voice lowered slightly. "Arrived 20 minutes ago, soaked but operational. According to intel, Blackwell doesn't know about the connection." "Good. Keep it that way until we need the leverage." Eleanor paused as she detected movement outside, the faint outline of figures advancing through the downpour, using vehicles as cover. "Handler, I have to go silent. They're moving into position." The comm unit clicked off as Eleanor moved away from the windows, keeping to the shadows. Through the specialized contact she'd inserted, another relic from her former life, designed to enhance vision in low-light conditions. She could make out at least 8 figures surrounding the saloon. They were deploying with tactical discipline, establishing a perimeter rather than rushing in. Professional operators, not common thugs. Sharp crack punctuated the storm's rumble as the first shot shattered one of the front windows. Glass fragments sprayed across the floor, but the specialized film Thomas had insisted on during renovations held the pane largely intact. Another shot followed, then a third, systematic attempts to create entry points while testing for return. Fire. Eleanor remained motionless in the shadows. Standard provocative tactics, attempting to draw defensive fire to identify positions. She wouldn't oblige them with such an amateur mistake. The front door burst open, kicked in with enough force to splinter the frame. 2 figures entered in standard breach formation, weapons sweeping the seemingly empty saloon. Their movements betrayed specialized training. Military or intelligence background, Eleanor assessed. dangerous but predictable. She watched through, the reflection of a strategically placed mirror as they advanced, moving from cover to cover with practiced coordination. Their focus remained on obvious defensive positions, behind the bar, the staircase, the storage room door, overlooking the shadow-draped alcove where she waited. The first operator moved past her position without detecting her presence. The second followed 3 paces behind, scanning high while his partner covered low, perfect tactical spacing for normal operations. A critical mistake when facing the ghost. Eleanor emerged from concealment like a phantom materializing from the darkness. Her hand clamped over the second operator's mouth, stifling any warning as she applied precise pressure to the carotid artery. He collapsed without a sound, unconscious before he hit the floor. The first operator, sensing something amiss, began to turn, too late. Eleanor's strike connected with anatomical precision, targeting nerve clusters at the base of the skull. He dropped, weapon clattering across the floorboards. 2 down! Non-lethal! She sub-vocalized into her reactivated comm unit, dragging the unconscious men into the alcove and securing them with specialized restraints. Status of the perimeter? 6 more advancing on your position, Michael replied, from his observation post in an abandoned building across the street, plus 2 vehicles at the north and south approaches. They're coordinating through hand signals and tactical radios. Eleanor retrieved the fallen operator's weapons, checking them before setting them aside. Not their primary arsenal, these were secondary weapons, which meant the wolves were still treating this as a reconnaissance mission, not a full assault. They wanted to capture, not kill, at least for now. They're looking for the ghost, she murmured, not a frontal confrontation. The revelation shifted her tactical approach. If Roman Blackwell wanted her specifically, the wolves would be under orders to secure her alive, which meant they'd be employing specialized tactics rather than overwhelming force. Eleanor moved to the large mirror behind the bar, pressing a hidden switch that activated the building's security upgrades, another of Thomas's renovations she'd enhanced over the years. Metal shutters silently descended over the windows, sealing entry points. Specialized locks engaged on all doors, except one, the delivery entrance, which she deliberately left accessible. If the wolves wanted in, she'd give them a single point of entry, one she could control. "Ghost, what's your play?" Clara asked, her voice tense with professional concern. "I'm going hunting," Eleanor replied, retrieving a specialized tactical kit from beneath the floorboards. The equipment inside, night vision, non-lethal neutralizers, sound suppressors, was designed for silent elimination of multiple targets in enclosed spaces. Time to remind the wolves why people used to fear the ghost. She applied dark camouflage to her face, muscle memory guiding her fingers through a routine she hadn't performed in 5 years. The transformation wasn't merely physical. Something fundamental shifted in her bearing, her movements becoming fluid and predatory as she fully embraced the operative she had once been. "Michael, cut the primary power to the building on my signal. Clara, monitor radio frequencies. I want to know when Roman Blackwell makes contact with his team." Eleanor positioned herself near the delivery entrance, becoming one with the shadows as rain continued to pound against the metal shutters. Through a specialized viewing port, she watched as 4 more operators approached the rear of the building, communicating through tactical hand signals as they prepared to breach the only accessible entry point. The moment they committed to the breach, door kicked open, flashlights sweeping the darkened interior, Eleanor activated her signal. The building plunged into absolute darkness as Michael cut the power from his remote position. What followed unfolded with the choreographed precision of a nightmare. The wolves' flashlights created perfect target indicators in the darkness, while Eleanor, enhanced vision, allowing her to navigate with predatory ease, moved among them like a lethal shadow. The first operator went down without a sound. A precise, blow rendering him unconscious before he registered the threat. The second managed half a turn before Eleanor's strike disabled him. The third and fourth responded with trained reflexes, weapons tracking toward movement, but Eleanor was already elsewhere, ghosting between shadows, appearing momentarily before vanishing again. One by one, the operators fell, neutralized with surgical precision. No shots fired, no alarms raised, nothing to alert the remaining forces outside that their breach team had been systematically eliminated. 4 more secured, Eleanor reported, binding the unconscious operators with efficient movements. Status of the perimeter? They're getting nervous, Michael replied. Lead vehicle is requesting radio check from the breach team. Perfect. Eleanor retrieved a radio from one of the fallen operators, switching to their frequency. She pressed the transmit button twice in quick succession, followed by a single, longer press, the standard all-clear signal used by professional tactical teams. Basic but effective counterintelligence, buying her precious minutes while the perimeter team believed their breach was still in progress. She dragged the unconscious operators into a storage closet, securing the door before moving toward the front of the saloon. Through the specialized viewing ports in the shutters, she could see the remaining wolves growing visibly restless as minutes passed without contact from their entry team. A new vehicle approached through the downpour, a large black SUV that screamed government issue, though it bore no official markings. It stopped beyond the perimeter, and even through the rain, Eleanor could make out the distinctive silhouette of the man who emerged. Tall, distinguished despite the storm, moving with the confident authority of someone accustomed to absolute command. Roman Blackwell had arrived personally. Handler, we have primary target on sight, Eleanor reported, an unfamiliar tension threading through her normally detached operational voice, requesting background verification. Clara's response came swiftly. Roman Blackwell, former intelligence contractor, specialized in information brokerage, suspected of orchestrating multiple arms deals, including Belgrade. No confirmed kills, but believed responsible for at least 17 eliminated assets, including, her voice faltered momentarily, including his daughter, Sophia Blackwell, codename Reflector. The name sent a lightning bolt of memory through Eleanor's mind. Reflector, the young woman with fierce intelligence and quiet courage who had approached the agency with evidence of her father's crimes. Eleanor's primary asset during the Belgrade operation, whose information should have dismantled one of the largest illegal arms networks in Eastern Europe. Instead, the operation had been compromised from within, resulting in Sophia's death and the ghost's supposed demise. Thomas was Sophia's handler, Eleanor realized aloud, pieces clicking into place with crystalline clarity. That's why he had the Belgrade files. He was protecting her legacy. Affirmative, Clara confirmed. Thomas extracted the physical evidence Sophia had compiled when the digital copies were compromised. He was supposed to deliver it to the agency, but disappeared instead, with you. The revelation should have felt like betrayal, but Eleanor found only a deepening resolve. Thomas hadn't just saved her from Belgrade, he'd protected her from an agency compromised at the highest levels. He'd given her a new life, while safeguarding the evidence that could finally bring Roman Blackwell to justice. Outside, Blackwell had joined his team, his commanding presence evident as he gestured toward the saloon. Even at this distance, Eleanor could see the cold intensity in his bearing, the focus of a man driven by something beyond mere professional interest. He's organizing a full assault, Michael warned. I count 14 operators in tactical formation, plus Blackwell himself. Eleanor moved to the staircase mirror, the one concealing Thomas's hidden compartment, and the mysterious titanium case. The biometric lock couldn't recognize her fingerprints, but perhaps she studied the case more carefully, noticing a small optical scanner concealed within the locking mechanism. Not fingerprints, retinal patterns. With sudden certainty, she positioned her eye before the scanner, holding perfectly still as a faint red light traced her iris. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside lay not the file she had expected, but a single data drive and a photograph. Sophia Blackwell with Thomas, both smiling, looking not like handler and asset, but like father and daughter. On the back, written in Sophia's handwriting, "For Eleanor, the only other person he trusts. If you're reading this, I'm gone, but the truth doesn't have to die with me." The pieces locked into place with devastating finality. Sophia hadn't just been an asset. She had been Thomas's daughter from a relationship that predated her father's criminal enterprise. Roman Blackwell wasn't just pursuing the ghost. He was hunting the operative he believed had stolen both his daughter's loyalty and the evidence of his crimes. "Clara," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the revelation. "Contact Director Collins. Tell him Operation Reflection wasn't compromised from within the agency. The breach came from Roman Blackwell himself. He sacrificed his own daughter when he realized she was gathering evidence against him." "How can you be sure?" Clara asked. Eleanor held up the data drive, though no one could see it. "Because I'm holding proof that Thomas was Sophia's biological father. Roman discovered his daughter's true parentage and her role as an informant simultaneously. He eliminated her to protect himself, then created the narrative that the ghost had failed to protect his asset. The implications rippled outward like a stone thrown into still water. Thomas hadn't just been agency support staff. He had been orchestrating his own operation to bring down the man who murdered his daughter. Eleanor hadn't been a random assignment, but a deliberate choice. The operative he believed could finish what Sophia had started. "Ghost!" Michael's urgent voice interrupted her thoughts. "They're making their move. Full perimeter breach in 60 seconds. Eleanor tucked the data drive into a specialized pocket in her tactical vest. "Understood. Initiate protocol whisper." She moved to the center of the saloon, standing fully exposed as Michael triggered the next phase of their defense. Throughout the building, specialized devices activated simultaneously, releasing a customized compound into the air, harmless but disorienting, designed to degrade night vision equipment and disrupt tactical coordination. As the wolves breached every entrance at once, they encountered not darkness, but a disorienting haze that rendered their advanced equipment worse than useless. Confused shouts and collisions echoed as their carefully planned assault dissolved into chaos. In the midst of this manufactured confusion stood Eleanor, perfectly still, her specialized equipment allowing her to track each operator as they stumbled. Through the haze, she didn't attack, didn't hide, merely waited as the confusion reached its peak. "Enough!" Roman Blackwell's authoritative voice cut through the chaos. "Hold positions! Everyone freeze!" Gradually, the wolves fell silent, their tactical formation reduced to confused operatives frozen in place, weapons raised against invisible threats. "Ghost," Blackwell called, his voice carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "I know you're here. Show yourself, and perhaps we can resolve this professionally." Eleanor remained silent, observing as Blackwell moved cautiously through his disoriented team. Unlike his operators, he wore no tactical gear, no night vision equipment, just an expensive suit now drenched from the rain and the unmistakable outline of a sidearm beneath his jacket. "5 years I've searched for you," he continued, moving deeper into the saloon. 5 years tracking the operative who turned my daughter against me, who filled her head with lies about her father's business. Eleanor watched him through the haze, assessing. This close, she could see the features Sophia had inherited, the same determined jawline, the same intensity in his eyes. But where Sophia's intensity had been fueled by conviction, Roman's burned with something darker. "Thomas didn't turn Sophia against you," Eleanor said finally, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere in the disorienting haze. You did that yourself when she discovered what you really were. Blackwell's head snapped toward her voice, then away as the acoustics made localization impossible. You know nothing about my daughter. I know she was brave enough to stand against her own father when she discovered his involvement in illegal arms dealing. I know she was killed not by a compromised operation, but by your direct order when you realized she was gathering evidence against you. Blackwell's expression tightened with fury. Lies! The ghost failed to protect her during extraction. Your agency hung her out to dry when the operation went south. No, Roman! Eleanor stepped forward, becoming visible through the dissipating haze. You killed her because you discovered who her real father was. Blackwell froze, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon. What did you say? Thomas Blackwood, your wife's lover before you married her. Sophia's biological father. Eleanor's voice carried absolute certainty. You didn't just lose an informant when she died. You killed your rival's daughter out of spite. The color drained from Blackwell's face, shock momentarily overwhelming his practiced control. In that instant of distraction, Eleanor moved, not to attack, but to position herself between Blackwell and the nearest of his operators. The Belgrade. Files were never the primary target, she continued, circling slowly. They were just leverage, evidence Thomas preserved to ensure Sophia's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. The real target was always you, Roman, a father willing to kill his own daughter to protect his criminal empire. You understand nothing, Blackwell snarled, recovering his composure. Thomas stole everything from me, my wife's loyalty, my daughter's trust, eventually even the operative I'd spent years cultivating within the agency. Eleanor's mind registered the implication instantly, pieces falling into their final configuration. You were Clara's handler. She was reporting to you while assigned to my operations. A cold smile twisted Blackwell's lips. Handler 6 was among my most valuable assets, positioned perfectly to monitor agency operations against my interests. She provided the intelligence that allowed me to control which investigations succeeded and which encountered unfortunate complications. The revelation should have shaken her, but Eleanor had survived too many betrayals to be derailed by one more. And yet here you are, Roman, hunting a ghost while surrounded by operators who don't realize they're working for the biggest arms dealer in 3 states. She raised her voice slightly, addressing the wolves directly. Your employer isn't just a businessman expanding his territory. He's a weapons broker who arranges for American arms to end up in conflict zones around the world. He murdered his own daughter when she threatened to expose him. How many of you signed up for that? Uncertainty rippled through the operators, visible even through the haze. These weren't ideologues or true believers, but professionals following orders. The seed of doubt had been planted. Blackwell recognized the danger immediately. She's manipulating you. The ghost is a professional liar, trained to turn allies against each other. Am I? Eleanor held up the data drive. Everything is here. Roman, Sophia's evidence, wire transfers, meeting recordings, your direct orders to eliminate federal agents investigating your operation. She met his gaze steadily. Your daughter died trying to stop you. What do you think your men will do when they learn the truth? For a heartbeat, the saloon existed in perfect stillness, the wolves frozen in uncertainty, Blackwell calculating options, Eleanor watching it all with the detached focus of the ghost. Then Blackwell moved, drawing his weapon with the practiced speed of someone who had survived in the shadows through decisive action rather than hesitation. His aim was perfect, the barrel centering on Eleanor's chest with unwavering precision. What he couldn't know was that Eleanor had positioned herself precisely where the specialized mirror behind her would reveal his movement, a crucial half-second before it occurred. As his weapon cleared its holster, she was already reacting. not diving for cover, but advancing directly toward him with the controlled aggression that had made the ghost legendary. The first shot went wide as she slipped inside his guard, her forearm redirecting his wrist with brutal efficiency. The second never came as she applied devastating pressure to nerve clusters in his gun hand, forcing involuntary muscle release. The weapon clattered to the floor as Eleanor continued her advance, transitioning seamlessly from disarmament to immobilization. A precision strike to the solar plexus doubled Blackwell over, followed by a knee that connected with anatomical precision to render him momentarily incapacitated. Within 3 seconds of his initial movement, Roman Blackwell found himself face down on the saloon floor, the ghost's knee between his shoulder blades and his own weapon pressed against the base of his skull. "Stand down," Eleanor commanded the wolves, who had raised their weapons in automatic response. "Your employer just attempted to murder a federal agent in front of 14 witnesses. Make your choices accordingly." Outside, the storm's fury began to abate, faint moonlight breaking through the clouds as the haze within the saloon continued to dissipate. In that emerging clarity, the wolves found themselves facing a decision point. Continue following a leader who had deceived them, or recognize the shifting winds. One by one, they lowered their weapons. "Handler," Eleanor activated her comm unit. "Situation contained. Primary target secured. Request immediate extraction and evidence preservation team." Clara's voice replied with professional detachment. "Understood, Ghost." Director Collins confirms. "Task force is inbound. ETA 40 minutes. Preservation protocols are active." Eleanor maintained her position, the weight of the past 5 years, of Thomas's sacrifice, of Sophia's courage, of her own rebirth as both widow and operative, settling around her with unexpected lightness. "It's over, Roman," she said quietly. "The ghost has completed her mission." Behind every mirror in the Timberline Saloon waited a weapon. But the most powerful weapon had been the truth hidden in plain sight, reflected in the legacy of a daughter's courage and a father's love, not the father who lay defeated beneath her, but the one who had given Eleanor a second chance at life while ensuring justice would eventually find its way home. Dawn broke tentatively over Oak Ridge Valley, pale light filtering through dissipating storm clouds. The Timberline Saloon stood silent in the aftermath of chaos, its facade deceptively unchanged, while its interior told a different story. Tactical gear abandoned by the silverback wolves lay scattered across wooden floorboards. The mirrored walls reflected fragments of the night's confrontation, an overturned table here, a discarded weapon there, the lingering chemical haze of protocol whisper creating ghostly patterns in the growing light. In the center of it all stood Eleanor, Blackwood, her tactical attire incongruous against the backdrop of polished oak and antique fixtures. She watched through the saloon's windows as federal vehicles established a perimeter around the property. Task force operatives, professionals who moved with the coordinated precision she recognized from her former life, secured the scene with methodical efficiency. Roman Blackwell sat handcuffed to a chair nearby, his once immaculate suit rumpled, his aristocratic features set in a mask of cold calculation despite his defeat. He hadn't spoken since his initial capture, observing the proceedings with the detached analysis of a strategist already plotting his next move. "The data drive checks out," Director Collins confirmed, approaching Eleanor with the cautious respect one might accord a lethal but unpredictable asset. At 60, Collins retained the sharp alertness that had defined his 30-year career in intelligence operations. His silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, but the faint lines around his eyes spoke of battles fought in shadows few would ever glimpse. "The authentication protocols confirm it's the original Belgrade intelligence, untampered with and damning as hell." Eleanor nodded, her focus remaining on Blackwell. And the connection to Thomas? Confirmed through DNA records, Thomas Blackwood was indeed Sophia's biological father. Collins glanced toward their prisoner. Roman's wife had a relationship with Thomas before her marriage. She never told either man the truth about Sophia's parentage. She knew, Blackwell spoke suddenly, his cultured voice carrying through the quiet room. Catherine always knew. I discovered the truth when Sophia required a tissue match for surgery at 17. Catherine had died by then, but the medical tests revealed I couldn't possibly be Sophia's father. His eyes fixed on Eleanor with unnerving intensity. I kept the secret, gave her my name, my resources, my protection, and Thomas stole her loyalty anyway. Eleanor turned to face him fully. Thomas didn't steal anything. Sophia made her own choice when she discovered what you were really doing with your government contracts. Naive idealism, Blackwell dismissed. She had no concept of the complexities involved in global security arrangements. You were selling weapons to insurgent groups while under contract to suppress those same organizations, Eleanor stated flatly. I'd call that treason, not complexity. Collins cleared his throat. The task force has secured Blackwell's operational headquarters based on the intelligence you provided. His entire network is being dismantled as we speak. 17 arrests across 3 states, evidence of corruption in 2 federal agencies, and connections to at least 4 international arms dealers. He allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. 5 years in development, but Operation Reflection is finally complete. Eleanor sensed someone approaching from behind, the distinctive rhythm of familiar footsteps. Clara appeared at her side, no longer in her telegraph operator disguise, but dressed in the practical attire of a field analyst, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun. The final piece, Clara said, handing a slim folder to Collins. Confirmation that the Belgrade operation was compromised from within. Roman had 2 assets inside the agency, feeding him operational details, one of whom was Handler 6. Eleanor studied Clara with newfound understanding. You weren't working for Blackwell. You were working against him, from inside his operation. A ghost of a smile touched Clara's lips. Thomas recruited me after Belgrade. We both believed the agency had been compromised at the highest levels, but couldn't identify all the infiltrators, so we created a counter-narrative that I had been Blackwell's asset all along. A triple agent, Eleanor murmured. The person Roman thought was reporting to him was actually feeding him controlled information, while gathering evidence against him, Clara confirmed. It was Thomas's plan, make Roman believe he had assets inside our operation while we systematically identified his actual network. Roman's expression betrayed no surprise, merely a cold reassessment of the players on his mental chessboard. Clever, but irrelevant now. You understand I'll never see the inside of a courtroom because of your governmental connections, Collins asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Those have already been severed. Your protection disappeared the moment we secured the Belgrade files. You're more naive than my daughter, Blackwell replied, his confidence unshaken. Men like me are never truly captured. We are merely temporarily inconvenienced. Eleanor turned toward one of the large mirrors decorating the saloon wall, studying its reflection thoughtfully. Thomas told me the truth was in the reflections. I thought he meant the hidden compartments behind the mirrors, but that wasn't it at all. She approached the mirror, running her fingertips along its ornate frame. The mirrors themselves were the message. Thomas designed this entire place as both fortress and evidence vault. Her fingers found a small mechanism concealed within the carving. Every mirror in the timberline has been recording since the renovations were completed. The mirror swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing not weapons this time, but sophisticated surveillance equipment. The implications rippled through the room like a shockwave. 5 years of recordings, Eleanor explained, turning to face Blackwell, whose composure had finally cracked, the first flicker of genuine concern crossing his features. Every conversation in this saloon, preserved and backed up to secure servers, including, I suspect, conversations between your wolves about operations conducted under your direct orders. Collins moved to examine the equipment, professional appreciation evident in his expression. Thomas always was a meticulous planner. The entire saloon is a skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility, disguised as a frontier watering hole. And I've been maintaining it unwittingly, Eleanor added. My weapons behind every mirror inadvertently protected his surveillance system as well. Roman's calculated confidence had transformed to cold fury. You have nothing that will stand up in court. My attorneys will have difficulty explaining the recorded confession you just made regarding your daughter's parentage and your illegal arms deals, Clara interrupted, or the detailed operational directives you gave the wolves regarding the elimination of federal witnesses that were recorded when you arrived last night. For the first time, genuine defeat registered in Blackwell's expression. He had been outmaneuvered not just by the ghost, but by the man he had spent years dismissing as a mere rival for his wife's affections. Thomas Blackwood had designed a trap 5 years in the making, with Eleanor as its unwitting centerpiece. There's something else you should know, Eleanor said, approaching Blackwell with the measured stride of a predator who no longer needed to rush. Sophia wasn't killed in Belgrade. She was extracted, badly wounded, but alive. The revelation hit Blackwell like a physical blow. Impossible. I saw the reports. You saw what Thomas wanted you to see, Clara interjected. The agency's official. Finding of her death was part of Thomas's long-term strategy. Sophia has been living under protective custody for 5 years, providing testimony against your operation. Our unexpected asset, Eleanor clarified, meeting Roman's stunned gaze. She arrived in Oak Ridge Valley last night. Your men were so focused on breaching the saloon that they never noticed another player entering the field. The double doors of the timber line swung open. Framed in the dawn light stood a woman in her early 30s, her bearing elegant despite the simplicity of her clothing. The resemblance to Roman was striking, the same determined jawline, the same penetrating eyes. But where his gaze held, cold calculation, hers burned with quiet resolve. Sophia Blackwell crossed the threshold, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had survived catastrophic injury. A barely perceptible limp marked her right side, and a thin scar traced from temple to jaw, permanent reminders of Belgrade. "Hello, Father," she said, her voice steady, despite the weight of their history. Roman stared as though seeing a ghost. "Sophia, how—" "Thomas got me out," she answered the unfinished question. "After your men left me for dead, the agency's medical team kept me alive, but it was Thomas who gave me a chance at a new life." She glanced at Eleanor, a moment of understanding passing between them, just as he did for others who needed to disappear. Eleanor studied the woman who had, in many ways, been the catalyst for her own transformation, from the ghost to Eleanor Blackwood, and now to some integration of both identities. "Thomas never told me about you," she said quietly. "To protect both of us," Sophia confirmed. "If either of us were captured, we couldn't reveal what we didn't know." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "He spoke of you often, though. Said you were the one person he trusted to finish what we started when the time came." Roman had recovered enough to reassemble his mask of controlled disdain. "So that's Thomas's grand design? My own daughter testifying against me? Even with your testimony, there are contingencies in place. People who will ensure this never reaches trial." "You mean people like Senator Hargrove?" Collins asked, "or Deputy Director Westfield? They're being taken into custody as we speak, based on evidence from the Belgrade files. Or perhaps you mean Judge Calloway, Clara added, who was recorded accepting payment from your organization on 3 separate occasions over the past year. A new voice entered the conversation, Michael entering from the rear of the saloon with a tablet in hand. Director, we've completed preliminary analysis of the surveillance archives. We've identified 37 government officials implicated in Mr. Blackwell's operation, including 2 cabinet-level appointees. Roman's face remained impassive, but Eleanor, trained to read the subtle tells of professional operatives, caught the microscopic tightening around his eyes, the first genuine indication that he recognized the completeness of his defeat. "It's over, Roman," she said quietly. "Thomas designed a perfect trap, and you walked into it exactly as he predicted you would." "Thomas is dead," Blackwell countered, a final attempt at psychological leverage. Whatever satisfaction he might have, taken from this moment, died with him. "Yes," Eleanor acknowledged, an unexpected peace settling over her. "Thomas is gone, but what he built endures." She gestured to the saloon around them, its mirrors now revealed not as mere decorative elements, but as silent witnesses to years of calculated patience. "You saw a simple widow running a frontier saloon, but this place was always a fortress, designed by a father protecting his daughter's legacy and a husband creating a sanctuary for his wife." Sophia approached her father, stopping just beyond arm's reach. "I mourned you when I discovered what you'd become," she said, her voice carrying the weight of old grief. "The father who taught me to ride a bicycle, who read me bedtime stories, that man died long before Belgrade." Roman's composure cracked further. "Everything I built was meant to be yours eventually. The empire, the connections, the influence, your birthright." "Built on blood money and betrayal," Sophia replied without heat. "I chose a different inheritance, the truth Thomas showed me." As federal agents prepared to transport Blackwell to a secure facility, Eleanor found herself standing before the largest mirror in the saloon, the one behind the bar that had concealed her favorite shotgun for 5 years. In its reflection, she saw not just herself, but the layers of identity she had accumulated and discarded. The ghost, the widow, and now something new emerging from their integration. "What happens now?" Clara asked, joining her before the mirror. Eleanor considered the question, watching as agents methodically documented and secured the surveillance equipment hidden throughout the timberline. "The agency will want the ghost back, I imagine, Director. Collins has already prepared reinstatement papers," Clara confirmed, "with commendations and a significant promotion. Your legend has only grown during your absence." "And what about Eleanor Blackwood?" Clara smiled slightly. "That's entirely up to you, though I suspect Oak Ridge Valley would miss her." Eleanor turned away from the mirror to survey the saloon. The business she had built, the community she had protected, the life she had created from the ashes of her former existence. "Thomas once told me there would come a time when I wouldn't have to choose between who I was and who I'd become." She touched the frame of the mirror thoughtfully. "Perhaps this is that moment." Michael approached, his expression caught between respect and uncertainty, the look of someone seeing a familiar face in an entirely new light. "The evacuation team reports all townspeople are safe to return. Rebecca's already asking when you'll reopen. Says the town needs its gathering place, especially now." Eleanor nodded, decision crystallizing. "Tell her 3 days. We have some repairs to make first." "And the mirrors?" he asked, glancing at the now exposed surveillance equipment. "We keep them," Eleanor replied, "though perhaps with some modifications." As the federal task force completed their operation, Eleanor made her way to the timberline's front porch. The morning sun had finally broken through completely, painting Oak Ridge Valley in the fresh light of possibility. In the distance, she could see townspeople beginning to return, their vehicles winding down from the mining office where they had sheltered during the confrontation. Sophia joined her on the porch, her presence bringing the strange symmetry of their connected lives into focus. "He would be proud of you," she said quietly. "Thomas believed you would find your way back to yourself eventually." "Not back," Eleanor corrected gently. "Forward, to something new." They stood in companionable silence, watching the town come back to life after the storm, both the literal one that had passed during the night and the figurative one that had been brewing for 5 years. "Will you stay?" Eleanor asked finally. "Oak Ridge Valley has a way of healing those who need it." Sophia considered the offer, her gaze taking in the mountain community with its weathered buildings and resilient citizens. "Perhaps for a while. I've been a ghost in my own way these past 5 years. It might be time to become substantial again." The parallel wasn't lost on Eleanor, who felt the weight of her dual identities settling into a new configuration. Not competing forces, but complementary aspects of a complete self. The ghost would always be part of her, with all the skills and instincts honed through years of covert operations. But Eleanor Blackwood had built something equally valuable, a life anchored in community, in purpose beyond the next mission. Behind every mirror in this place, Thomas hid both weapons and truth, she mused aloud. Protection and revelation in the same concealment. A fitting metaphor for the woman who wields them, Sophia observed. As the first returning townspeople approached the timberline, Eleanor straightened her shoulders, the widow and the operative finding common purpose in the simple act of welcoming her community home. The federal vehicles were departing with their high-value prisoner, taking with them the tangible reminder of her former life. What remained was the saloon, the town, and the woman she had become, stronger for having integrated rather than buried her past. "Mrs. Blackwood," Rebecca called, hurrying up the street with Marcus and several other townspeople. "Is it true? Are they gone for good?" Eleanor smiled, genuine warmth replacing the calculated expressions she had worn throughout the night. "They're gone," she confirmed. "The timberline will reopen in 3 days, after we repair the damage." "We'll help," Marcus offered immediately, others nodding in agreement. "This place is the heart of Oak Ridge Valley." As the townspeople gathered on the porch, their relief and questions flowing around her, Eleanor felt the final pieces of her fragmented self align into coherence. The ghost had completed her mission. Eleanor Blackwood had protected her home. What emerged from their confluence was a woman who could stand in both worlds without being diminished by either. Behind every mirror in the Timberline Saloon waited a weapon, but the most powerful arsenal had proven to be the truth reflected in their silvered surfaces. The truth about Roman Blackwell, about Thomas's legacy, and most importantly, about Eleanor herself, not widow or operative, but a seamless integration of both, standing in the morning light as the town she had saved gathered around her. The fear ghost had emerged from the shadows, not to disappear again, but to step fully into the life Eleanor Blackwood had built. A life with room enough for all the reflections of who she had been and who she might yet become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.